All right. Hi, guys. Welcome to the second episode of Bethicality, featuring myself, Abby, Josh, and then we have a little special guest, Molly, with us today from our English class. So hello. Today, we're going to be talking probably about a little bit more of a serious-ish subject compared to last time. So what we have on the docket today is Bethics. So the... Josh, how do you explain it?
I would define Bethics as the applied philosophical principles that guide our lives at Bethel.
What he said.
Yep, pretty much.
So, yes, basically we're just going to be talking about that. And yeah, so take it away, Josh, I guess.
So I think we start with, defining that fully. I would say the principles that guide us are the set of beliefs we choose to posit in this current level of consciousness that we have, and how those affect our decisions and our perspectives on everything we encounter and everything we do. And it exists on a macro scale and on a micro scale. On a micro scale, should I go to the bathroom after this class? Should I do this or that? Deciding how to organize yourself day to day on small scale decisions, and then larger decisions. What am I going to major in? How do I want these friendships to play out? What career am I thinking about? How is my relationship with Christ? What are my goals? Things like that. That's the more macro level. And so we first have to identify the principles that we want to guide our lives, and then how we can actually utilize those and apply them.
Mm-hmm. And I think that coming out of a Bethel sense too, right?
Yeah. And this is going to be more specific to life at Bethel.
Mm-hmm. And this is the views of us. We don't speak for the entire student
Yes, this
body.
is not representative of the
just
entire body.
Little freshmen here.
And we're not even freshmen.
Not
We're
even
PSCR.
not even quite. We're just PSCR.
We haven't even graduated high school yet. But here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, so I guess we can just start with the whole, how do we view Bethel as far as being a different community than just being, in high school, as far as, how we view the world versus anywhere else, really. And this applies to Abby and Molly. You guys can talk on this too, of course.
Okay. Well, compared to high school, I think this is definitely different because it is a Christian environment. But I think I feel a lot more accepted here, I suppose. I was thinking about this week. High school has so many pressures, and I feel like I'm in such a smaller bubble, but here in college, it's definitely a bigger open space, and I feel more welcome here, and I'm able to be myself more than in high school I was. So I guess there's that to it.
I think, because we go to such a small high school, our graduating class
we should specify
will only be...
Molly and I go to the same high school.
Yeah, and our graduating class will be, 180 people. So we have very small circles, and everything is very
tight-knit.
Small town mentality.
Sure.
So everything goes around super fast. It's a lot of drama, and I think at Bethel it's just kind of an escape from all of that.
Yeah.
There's not the little things that everyone's worried about.
For sure.
And I don't know. So then, how has that been just coming to a bigger environment regardless? Yes, it's also a Christian environment, but, coming out of a graduating class of 180, I'm sure there's differences here too as far as having a bigger community overall.
There are people at my high school last year that I had every class with. So it's kind of nice to go to a different class and just have a completely different group of people and get their insight on different things and get to know different people.
Yeah. I think all my classes here are such a mix of different spreads of people. In some classes I have nursing majors who have my similar passion and similar life choices they're going to make in their lives, and then in our English class it's all PSCO and we're just a bunch of hooligans who mess around the whole hour and do ASL to each other.
Yeah. English is interesting. What would you say is the most important thing in guiding your interactions with others?
I think just finding people that are like you and that have similar mindsets to you so that you don't become someone who you don't want to be, and maintaining your values through that.
While also maintaining your values while also finding things that you can relate with other people, because you're gonna interact with people that you don't have the same moral, like that don't have the same moral values, but having like a common ground where you can like respect one another even though you don't necessarily like share the same values.
Yep.
Yeah, I
What
think
you said.
I think also it's important, I mean, with what you said, Abby, but also, I mean, I think it's important to be in a culture that's, this is hard to say, like, I mean, it's important, yes, to be surrounded by people that are similar, but also I think it's important to have some differences as well, just because that's what makes, you know, society be the same, because, you know, if everyone was the same, we'd be in such a boring world. So it would be, I mean, it makes life more interesting, I guess.
Broaden your horizons a little.
Yeah.
I think it helps us grow as people, like interacting with people who have different beliefs and discussing them and adapting your beliefs, or just kind of finding things that you have in common and agree on, but also debating and talking about things you don't.
Yeah. I don't know. For me personally, you know, at Irondale we had, you know, my graduating class will be about 420. So it's really big. So I don't know. It was interesting because, yeah, at, you know, some of the classes that I took and the way that all of that English is hard. The way that all kind of shook out, it was, you know, the same, you know, track or whatever with classes, you know, having those same people, but also, you know, having those different people. So in some ways, I mean, coming to Bethel too, it's a college, so it's bigger even. So I think it's a interesting way to, I don't know, I guess kind of going off of what Abby was saying was, you know, broadening your horizons with pretty much everything, whether it's just society or even just experiences with school as well.
Mm-hmm.
So when coming to the ideas of metaphysicality and theological constructs, a lot of people like to shy away from that because it becomes very difficult to answer those deep questions. And what I mean by that are questions that relate to what is there, why is it there, how does it work, and how can we utilize it. And that refers to, I mean, anything. I mean, and that becomes an absolute universal in that case. So we're very commonly in our lives not thinking about things like that. But in many cases, when you ponder the metaphysical, you develop new mindsets and new approaches that will affect your everyday lives and can persuade the decisions that you make. And what do you think is the most difficult thing about making decisions when it comes to with friends or with family? Like having to sacrifice one thing over the other. Where does that become difficult for you?
I don't know. It's a hard question to answer.
Yeah, I think it's important. It becomes hard when you aren't set in your values and you're fully aware of your values, where you know, when you don't know for sure what exactly you're not necessarily passionate about, but what you're believing in and what you're, you know, I guess in a sense arguing for, it becomes more of a, I don't know, it makes it a lot harder to really have those conversations, not only just with knowing what you're standing for, but also it makes it harder to be open because you still don't know for sure how you stand on the topic, and that makes it that much harder. I don't know. I think that's what's hard. What can be hard, like overall.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing.
I think it's also hard, like just in comparison in high school once again, because there are a lot of people who are very ignorant about like their beliefs, and they don't really know a lot of information about their beliefs, but they will argue it, and it's kind of hard to deal with those situations, and it almost becomes like personal with people when they start arguing about their beliefs, and the like arguments and disagreeing on things should be more a topic that you're able to discuss with people rather than something that is seen like that puts a wedge between you.
Mm-hmm. And that's not always their fault, because in high school we're all finding who we are, but I definitely agree with that.
I think it makes the topics and conversation a lot less civil.
Yes.
Which, I mean, personally, that's why I'm not a huge fan of talking about things like politics. Because, people are passionate about it, but it can get uncivilized, and people just get set in their ways incredibly quickly. And I don't know. I don't shy away from the topic necessarily. It's just it irritates me when it's, I don't know, becomes more of a personal thing.
Especially relating to politics, at our age, there are a lot of people who don't know their beliefs. They kind of go off of what they've been told to believe in a lot of cases. So they aren't necessarily the most educated on the topics that they're arguing, but they continue to argue them just because they are taught that they believe that, but they don't necessarily know why they believe it in some cases.
Sure.
So with the discussion of argumentation, I think it would be significant to point out how dialogue can be far more beneficial for groups of people interacting. And what I mean by dialogue is, sorry, I'm sick right now. A non-aggressive, organized manner of discussion where the parties are not seeking, like the parties involved are not seeking to have their point of view win out over the other point of views, but rather to bring out the best point of view in their opponent as possible. So it's about asking the questions of their opponent, the hard questions, so that their opponent can make the strongest argument possible for their case.
Yeah, like a selfless way of going about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you think the dialogical approach could be applicable, or is it too difficult to add that systematically?
I think that's a good way to approach it. I just think that's a hard way too, because we all have our own self-interests placed first in our minds. And a lot of us are really stuck in our ways. I mean, personally, I'm a really stubborn person, so it's sometimes hard for me to let others put their beliefs and values and, like, ideas strongly, and for me to just, like, sit back and be like, okay, I'll listen to you, and, like, you're right, whatever. Yeah, I think that's a good way of approaching it, for sure.
I find that I'm able to do that when the other person is, but as soon as it's hard when another person is, like, questioning your beliefs and trying to argue with you, it's hard not to continue the argument and go, like, into that and, like, stoop to their level. It's hard to just, like, step back and allow them to say what they want, because if they're not open to hearing what you have to say and it's only a one-sided, like, conversation, then it really serves no good.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure.
What's your opinion, Brandon?
I don't know. I think conversation is incredibly important, not only just if you're, discussing a topic, but that whole idea of deep conversation, just deepening your interactions and connections with other people, I think is very important as well. Just because, you have these surface level conversations with people, you may see every day, just like, I walk up to someone in class and say, hey, how was your weekend? How was your break? But it never, goes deeper with that, where at least, with like Josh and I, like, we talk about almost everything, I'd say, together, which, I mean, like, but he and I have a super deep connection, which I'm glad we have. But I think those connections really open the gate to other, important discussions that need to happen. So really, you kind of have to have that dialogical approach with, I mean, really anyone. And not only just, hitting surface level, but going deeper. And that deeper level is where, like, the important stuff can actually get done.
Yeah, especially if you're on the search for truth. If you're trying to discover your beliefs, the search for truth, or at least as we can define it to be truth, unsure of what that really means, is the ultimate goal in finding your beliefs. Your beliefs are predicated upon the principles that will be most advantageous to you, depending on how you view advantageousness, I suppose. Do you want to be fully self-absorbed and like be all about yourself and win at the world, basically, or do you want to be selfless and not care so much about recognition and achieve things in a way that doesn't bring power, fame, or wealth to you? And so it depends on what you want And I think as Christians, we're called more to the latter, to bring achievement to the world, but to give that recognition and fame and wealth to God. And we're to spread this amongst others as well, and do all things in Christ. And so I think that as a Bethel student, you want to be able to set your principles around the ideals that will be best suited to achieve that goal. And so identifying those principles is what conversation, I think, is for, and self-meditation.
I think that's partially why Bethel's like such a good environment to find your beliefs in and figure out who you are, is because it is a very safe environment and people are very respectful and caring, and they don't have the ulterior motives necessarily that may be present on a bigger campus where there is like more self-centered people, I guess.
Yeah, especially if you're someone that's very ambitious, you could be pulled towards self-interest over selflessness quite easily if that becomes an option. And at Bethel, it's encouraged to give all things to God. And so they want us to flourish, and they want that success not to just go to ourselves.
Yeah. I think that's really cool too, because the people here, not just professors, but also the students, we all encourage each other to do this. We kind of hold each other accountable in that sense to give the glory to God in everything that we do. And, that can almost, circle back to the covenant. And, we're all signing this thing to be a part of a covenant, to be in a community together, who upholds these values. And that's especially important with, really anything with that, but especially that's why it's great at Bethel compared to, we all have this same, we all basically, it's not a contract, but we basically agree by signing that we agree to do this with each other and to kind of take on the world, in air quotes, the world together in a Christian sense.
Or at least give a valiant effort to achieve it.
Right. Because
there's a vast distinction between what we can achieve based upon our values and what our values actually are. If we were to live out our lives 100% following our set of principles, we'd be superhuman at that point.
Right.
But we can't really do that. And so we'll try as hard as possible. And I think a good example of that is early America. They set their principles to be, like the country as a whole set the principle to be all are created equal under God. But it took a while for that to actually become true because they didn't uphold that principle. They believed it for a while, and that's why I think America achieved it before most other countries did. And so the more you give an effort to uphold your principles, the more likely you are to actually succeed in them.
I agree. Yep, everything you just said.
Why?
I don't know.
all right, go team.
Ooh. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just, I don't know. Being at Bethel, it's just interesting just because, I don't know. It's different being in an environment that's not 100% secular.
Oh, yeah. Okay, now I remember what we're talking about. Sorry. Brain fart. Yeah, I agree. I think that it's definitely a better place than high school. And I have friends here that keep me accountable to my values and that check up on me and be like, hey, like, this is what's right in this situation. And, like, if they know I'm going through something, they'll help me stay to what I would normally do. And I can ask them even, like, if I'm having trouble deciding, like, is this something that, like, seems like it's to my values. If I'm close to this person, I'll ask them and they can reflect that back on me and be like, yeah, that's something that like is Christ-like and something that I know supports your values. And that's a very helpful thing that I've found that I've gotten from my friends here at Bethel that I didn't have before. Definitely not in high school. Yeah.
The point we're at as seniors and upcoming freshmen, it's the point that's really important where people are trying to find out who they are and they're getting away from their families. Like, they're leaving home for the first time and they're they have this newfound independence, and I feel that oftentimes with freshmen in college and even seniors in high school, people get pulled onto bad tracks and do things that go against their morals because they have this desire to fit in, and they are pulled by their peers into situations that they wouldn't necessarily put themselves in. And Bethel is just an environment that isn't like that. We all want the best for one another and to live a moral life and make decisions that are overall good for ourselves and the environment of Bethel as a whole.
How would you define Bethel?
In what sense?
What is Bethel?
It's a college.
How would you
Thank you,
explain it
Molly.
to someone? Because we're speaking of it in a way that does not represent just a college.
I think when I explained it to my friends, a lot of people just ask how it is going, because I also have friends who do PSEO at the U, and they're having a very hard time. And I think Bethel as a whole is just very inclusive of everyone. It doesn't matter what background you have or what you believe in or anything. It's more just you're here to better yourself and learn, and everyone here we want each other to succeed and live the best life that we can.
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah, we all encourage each other, inclusive, but also, we encourage each other to grow in our faith as well. And I think that's also a really big aspect that I would explain Bethel as. It's a school where, not only is it just a school, but it's also a place where people come to better their faith and seek the opportunities to learn in a more Christian environment, and to be able, it's this amazing opportunity that we all have. Especially, every night with living on campus to, experience this community for everything that it has to offer and be able to encourage each other and to grow with each other, not just here to learn.
It truly is the best possible environment that I've ever experienced, because everyone does encourage each other to do better and be better as people. While in high school, oftentimes the people around you are the ones that encourage you or push you into situations that aren't necessarily the best for you.
And at the same time, it's not entirely devoid of the failures of humanity. There are still character flaws. There are still things that by our human nature we will not, because this is not a perfect environment. Every environment is imperfect. And so there are still things that will frustrate you or upset you. And I think through that, I would I would not let that encourage you to go away from your principles. And I would stay on the track of being strong.
I think that could apply to anywhere besides Bethel too. Even if you didn't end up here, or even at a Christian university, if you did end up at a more public university, a secular university, I think it's also important to be able to uphold those beliefs as well, and to say, figure out who you are, and in a sense of, understand where you are in your faith, and at that point, you need to stay strong with it as well. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I think that even here at Bethel, there's still going to be people here who are here for the wrong reasons, or don't uphold the beliefs of the covenant, that we want to be godly as much as possible. And I think that it's okay to associate with those people, but I don't think you should allow your life to be changed by them.
Right. And
you should still stick to your core values and being the best godly person, just person in general you can be.
Yeah, I think you shouldn't necessarily shut anyone out because of what they say. It's important to still, love on everyone as Christ loved us. And that's a big important part of being a Christian as well. But also, again, it's upholding to your beliefs and knowing where you stand. And understanding how important that is, especially in a time of our lives like this, where really this is here at college. This is the time where we're probably going to grow the most, because this is the first time we're away from home, for the most part. And yeah, this is the time we're away from home the most for the first time, and new community, new people.
Yeah.
And so this is the time to really understand that everything that happens is important.
Yeah, and I think in a way, just like you were saying, it's a new time for us to find ourselves. I think it's a time where we have to, maybe not the most difficult time for our faith, because I know I've had times that were harder on my faith in the past, but this is a time where we're on our own now. We have to see how our faith is going to stand in the real world, and I think that's a way for us to test our faith and let it stand more independently and stick to our values better than when we were at home and we could just follow our parents and what they say and have that protection of a household over our head. I think it's more individual here, that you have to stand up for yourself and find who you are through that.
Mm-hmm. It's that vulnerability that really you find out who you really are.
Being exposed to the world.
So, going from here, what topic would you like to transition into? Or would you like to continue on this?
I don't know. Talk about your phenomenology of spirit.
So, this takes away from an idea that F.W. Hegel originally produced, and it centers around the ideas of consciousness, both individually and systematically, so across an entire society, the level of consciousness. And it discusses a transition of the human mind, or spirit, or Geist, as Hegel defined it, and how we view things and how we think about things. Assuming it is us that is thinking, that's a big question that Descartes and Nietzsche dealt with. But going back to Hegel, the phenomenology of spirit discusses the varying degrees of consciousness up to the level of God. God is the ultimate consciousness that humanity would never be able to possibly achieve, because it is an all-being, omniscient view that enables absolute authority of the mind to the point of creation, to the point where the mind has control over all that there is, and is able to say the words all that there is and have that carry meaning. So with the phenomenology of spirit, I think it's something that you can actually apply to your life, because you can think about where your personal consciousness is. How do you think in a current way? Do you think analytically? Do you think on just more of a basic level? How do you structure your thoughts? And that's pretty important, because if you fully think out an idea or a certain topic, you'll often change your perspective on it. And this applies to many different things. This will get deep, but when psychologists deal with suicidal patients, the most important thing, and what works more than anything else, is fully talking it out. And your boy Kanye West talked about this too. He was contemplating suicide, and he went to a clinical psychologist, and they sat in there for 2 hours, and they just fully thought it out and articulated every possible idea, narrative, or outcome revolving around suicide itself. And he came to the conclusion that it was pointless. And so he didn't go through with it. And he was given an opportunity and an environment to actually think it out peacefully and constructively. And he wasn't just told or forced in any way to do anything. And so individually, the phenomenology of spirit can be significant, because it can approach your way of thinking and your level of consciousness on on an applicable level?
Yeah, I think the whole importance of being able to talk everything out, that's huge. Not only in, more serious contexts of that, but also just, really anything else. The only really real form of communication that we have as humans is talking. That's how we express ourselves. That's how we, communicate. That's how we basically do anything, is we have to talk about it. And that creates a significant a significant portal for, important conversations. And like what Josh was saying, those important conversations can hold serious, positives in some cases, but also, negatives in other cases as well. And that's what I think is really, again, it's really important to have those deep conversations with other people. Kind of like going back to what we were talking about earlier. It's one of those things where you just have to do it in order for, understandings to become for, deeper connections to be made, for anything else realistically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were talking about this in my psych class a little bit the other day. We focused more on the journaling, but this could also apply to talking to people. How when you assess a situation and you talk about everything that was involved and everything that happened and how you felt and stuff like that, it allows you to take a step back from what happened and remove yourself from the situation, especially if you're with another person, and maybe see it through a different point of view. And sometimes that is definitely beneficial. From the example that Josh gave, is very beneficial. Yeah.
I think that state of mind and that ability to cope with things allows you to push past many of the barriers that we will face in our upcoming years, because we are at this important stage in our life. We will experience things that will make us question who we are, and will put us in a place where we are out of our element. And having people to talk to, or even the journaling example, getting all of the emotions out, will allow us to grow from that and move past these situations.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, not only journaling, but I also, one thing that I really like to do is write letters. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, for me, it's super helpful with, there's just something that, again, it's this whole thing about human expression, that there's just something about it that you can't just not do it. For important relationships, you have to express yourself in a way that's deep, in a way that's important, because realistically, what else is there to do when you're not communicating in that way? If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I think that does make a lot of sense. What are you guys doing?
I'm playing footsie under the table.
Oh, okay. We're editing that out.
Some human interaction.
Yeah, just had to get a little example in there.
Yikes. Alrighty then.
So how was your spirit developed from that interaction with the feet?
My senses are awakened a little. I was falling asleep there, so I feel a lot of joy.
A quick kick to the shin really wakes you up.
Yes, but beyond this moment, how will it change your perspective moving forward in every situation you encounter?
It will bring it will bring us closer together and allow us to have a further connection, so we can discuss upcoming issues that we will face in our lives.
Ooh.
Oh. Wow, okay.
Yeah.
You have Brandon, I have Abby.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I think here I pulled up Bethel's covenant a while ago. But it kind of relates to what we're talking about. So I'm just going to read these couple paragraphs real quick. So Quote, because of Bethel's commitment to Christ, our unique calling as an educational community, and our understanding of what it means to live in today's world, we want to state clearly some of Bethel's rules and expectations. These are based on our understanding of the Bible and its authority for our faith and life, our desire to promote wellness and health in all areas, social, emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual, our theological and cultural heritage, and our understanding of our mission and calling. We recognize that not all devout Christians share these rules and expectations. However, certain issues are important for our educational mission and our life together at Bethel. These are designed to facilitate our growth, development, and learning as a community.
Yeah, that's a mixture of legal talk and actual insightful methodology. So, I don't know, what makes you... What are some like pondering questions that you have that you haven't fully answered for yourself? I'll give an example of a question.
So I think I have one, but I'm not sure.
So this one has to do with I'm not sure how to. In what way should I balance interacting with my family and my friends, because it becomes a very difficult balance of how to devote my time to both of those parties, and never will be fully satisfied with how much I give them. And so my ultimate question is, what method would give me the best results amongst both parties that would satisfy them the most? And I think I have a few ideas for solutions, but I don't really have a full solution.
Like, I feel like I have one, but I don't know how to word it or what it even is.
Try.
I think I have, it's just, I'm not really sure how to maintain friendships with like the people that are at our high school, just because a lot of them have a lack of morals and they make decisions that I don't necessarily support, and it's kind of hard because part of it is I've been friends with this person for many years, and how to maintain that friendship, but also just it's hard when someone that you're close with is making poor decisions. And I know that it is their journey and you have to, like, you can try to give guidance, but overall it is their decisions that like shape their lives, and it is their decisions to make. I
mean, I think it's important as a friend to, I mean, being a friend, you kind of, just from in that role, you kind of have, I don't know if this is the right word to use, but an obligation to, watch out for them. And really, you can't, make all their decisions for them, but you also, being their friend, it's part of your duty to, and I'm not condemning you in any way.
No,
I hope you know
okay.
that. It's part of your duty to really encourage them to do what is right.
Abby can probably attest to this, but
The people at our high school.
People at our high school, you can tell them one thing and they'll say okay and then do the complete opposite.
Yeah. And I think it's still good to be in their lives and to be, I know that like it's harder to lift someone up and they can pull you down easier, but I think it's good to just be there in their lives and like to know your values. I think that's a situation where you definitely have to be more cautious and to maybe even go so far as like writing down or like audibly like telling someone else like, these are what I don't want to do, this is what I stand for in my life, and and then like to be friends with that person that maybe is against those values, and to the point of like don't let them make you do something that would cross your values. And like once that happens, and or if it gets anywhere close to that, then maybe that's a point where you can end the friendship, or just tell the person that like we can't be as close as we'd want to be. Because I agree, some of the people at our high school are definitely hard to be friends with my beliefs, and or not even like in my past life, it hasn't been our high school that has given me those people. It's people from my old church, actually. They were the worst in my life, and that brought me into the darkest places and really far from God. And I think that's something that is my personal question that I don't know how to phrase exactly, but like I went to a place that like was super like not who I wanted to be, and went against the values that I stand for now, and I was still finding who I was. So like I try not to be hard on myself for that time, but also like a lot of the things that happened were just like second nature to me. Like they had always been there, and that like some of it was also just in my family, like that I see through my family history showing up. So stuff like that scares me sometimes, that like when God says to do something but my human nature says to do something else, or my family past and like how my family's acted, or I see it in my parents sometimes and stuff like that, that I'm like, wait a second, this isn't something that God wants, but it is so natural to me and seems to be written in my DNA, I guess.
Yeah, there's a division between God's will and our wills, and I think that they're structured around like our as Nietzsche put it, our will is the will to power. It's the will to not just like power in the sense of what we're talking about today in literature of being a king or something.
Mm-hmm.
Power in the sense of overcoming something and achieving something, whatever that is. Because if you think about what guides most of your goals, it's to achieve something either on a macro or micro scale. And so we have to always sacrifice our personal will to power, to God's will.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's where, knowing your beliefs really comes into play, because, if that, since that's such an innate part of our human nature, and having to actively 24/7 have the will to resist that and to say, no, God's will is how it needs to be. Knowing your values, and when it comes to that kind of thing, that's where it especially becomes very important, because you have to know how far you can go, and with what's God honoring, and that's where that becomes important.
Yeah, which I definitely have now, especially looking back on the stuff I've been through, which I think is a good experience for me to have, so that I could look back on it now, today, in my life, and say, like, that's not what I stood for or should stand for in my life. Why do you have a piece of foam?
Don't. It's okay.
Some
Don't worry about it.
ASMR.
All right. Yeah, that's a lesson learned.
Yeah.
Can I feel your foam?
Yes, you can feel the foam.
That was a weird thing to say. Josh, do you have another deep question for us?
That's a big piece of foam. Wow. Okay.
Please include this in our podcast.
In reference to existentialism and metaphysical views of everything, how do you relate your ideas of existence with your theological foundation and understanding of God?
That took a lot out of you, didn't it, to come up with that?
I also like how you keep asking the questions and then you're not very involved in the discussion.
I'm Socrates. I ask questions, I do not answer.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you ask the question again?
So, when you think of like both creation and our conception of being,
Mm-hmm.
like in this exact moment, we are in this room right now, and time just passed within the past 5 seconds, as we define time to be, and as we define seconds.
Mm-hmm.
So that's our conception of being. How do you relate your ideas of being, of creation, and of conceptual understanding? So like, because an idea does not like the idea of government is not a physical thing. There is no physical government. There's just a few buildings with some people and some guys with guns. It's not a physical thing. It's a concept. So So like government is a concept, school is a concept. How do you relate your ideas of conceptual processes with your understanding of theology and God?
So basically, how do you relate why we're here and your daily life to your Christianity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a simpler way to say that?
Yeah.
I don't know. For me, it's interesting. Well, not interesting, but I don't know. I kind of always have the mindset of, okay, it's that classic existential, why am I here? But at the same point, you have this answer of, well, one, we're here to glorify God and to give him all the glory, and to also, bring others to Christ and to share the gospel. And so I think having that mindset kind of running in the background of your mind all the time, that affects what you do. Like, being able to do this, like, you never know if there's someone who's listening who you just never know. But I personally believe that everything happens for a reason. And so I don't know, like, you and I have had conversations about this, but because everything happens for a reason, and if you have that mindset running in the back of your mind and you actively think about, everything I'm doing is for God, and that's why I'm here, is to give God all the glory and all of that. So that really prompts, I think, a lot of why we're here is it drives all your actions, if that makes sense.
I think it also helps in daily life when you are faced with like a trauma of some sort or a hard situation. If you live with, like, in the back of your mind, just knowing everything happens for a reason, this happened for a reason, this is gonna help me grow in a way that will further better myself, then I think it makes it.
Yeah, I have lots of examples of that in my life that could apply to that for sure. The first one that popped to my mind when you said that was when my grandpa passed away. It came out of the blue. We definitely were not expecting it, and it's a long story, but the moon has been a symbol for God being in my life and being present in my life. And I remember seeing that a couple nights into when my grandpa was in the ICU, and just feeling at peace because I knew God was in control of the situation, and I didn't know what he was doing with it. And I definitely did not want to lose my grandpa, obviously, but it was the kind of thing where I knew God was in control, and I knew that what was going to happen, and that, like, there's a bigger plan at work here, and that I could trust in God's perfect plan.
Yeah, once you restructure your perspective on an issue or on an event or emotion, essentially, you gain a new understanding of it and can remove pain that is involved with it.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you can also dangerously step into the waters of nihilism and embrace too much pain if you try and restructure your perspective on something. And so you need to develop an understanding to a level that will benefit your emotional health. And I think that's the significance of metaphysics, is that it both challenges us intellectually as well as can assist us emotionally.
I think the challenge that is faced by people when they undergo a traumatic event is that they're either pulled away from God, or they find themselves closer, because a lot of times people, when something bad happens, it's why, at least with friends of mine that I know, they experience questioning God of why would he do this? Why would he allow this to happen? When I just like to remind my friends, it's all happening for a reason. There is a bigger plan that is unknown to you, but you just need to have faith and accept that there is a bigger plan, and it will all work out in a certain way that was preset.
Yeah, and personally, I have an example of that. So when I was born, so I was born with clubfoot, so basically my feet were like basically made right angles with my legs. And so I had to go through like a bunch of surgeries and stuff when I was younger, and then when I was a baby I had to have like cast my feet to like bring my feet back up. But anyways, so those surgeries that I had, I just remember there were nights that like I would just, it's one of those things where, you know, just that pain is so intense where you literally like all you can do is cry, which, you know, it's just hard because it's like,
yeah,
you know, it's just, you're, you know, when that questioning comes in and you're like, you know, why is this happening, even though you know everything happens for a reason. But anyways, fast forward a couple years, and then so we have this, my family has this friend who have the friends with another family, and there's this guy who so like basically he kind of had a similar problem with me, you know, had a couple surgeries, but they ran some labs on him and it's still not everything was still, you know, as it should have been, and something was off. So they did some more looking and they found out that basically his aorta was super enlarged, so, you know, like the valve of your heart, and if that, you know, bursts, you basically, you know, you die. So which, I mean, it's grim, but that's how it is. And so, I mean, realistically, you know, so we referred him to, like, for the original thing with the feet, you know, we referred him to my surgeon, he's really cool. He's a really great guy. And so, but they eventually found that out, and, you know, they were saying to us afterwards, they're like, oh yeah, like, if you never referred us to him, we never would have found out, and like something would have happened. So it's like, yeah, it may take a few years, it may take, you know, decades potentially, but, you know, like we've been saying, everything happens for a reason, and you just kind of have to remember that no matter how hard things may seem at the time, no matter how much pain you may be in physically, like nothing can, you know, forever have that pain.
Yeah. Physically you may be weak, but metaphysically you'll be strong.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And something that when I was younger, one of my camp counselors told me this, when I was going through some harder challenges through my childhood. She told me that God will never put you through something you can't get through, which got me through a lot. But you have to consider this, that, like, you need God for that to work. Without that, it doesn't work. Like, if you're not trusting in him, then, and if you go through your life trying to do it all on your own and you're wondering, hey, like, why isn't this working? God's putting me through all this, like, awful things and it's, like, falling apart. That's not going to be true, obviously, because God's the one in control and you need to give it up to him. But he won't put you through something he knows you can't get through. Like, he's only doing it to make you stronger, and he knows the bigger plan. So it's important to trust in him through it.
Yeah.
Anything else that anyone would like to state on that topic?
I don't know. I just, yeah, again, I think it's important to realize that, you know, you need to, you know, depend on God, because as humans, we can only do so much, and that so much is really not much at all. And so, you know, everything you have to do, you have to remember that God's in control, and we, as much as we think we can do things, we really can't to a certain extent. And we have to realize that, you know, we have to depend on God, because he's the one who's in control, and there's no one else that is in control. And there's nothing else that we can really do about certain things. You know, the only being that we can control is ourselves to an extent. And so
yeah, and even then the only thing we can truly control is our present attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And I think finding support in God makes us very spiritually grounded, which allows us to be in the best mindset in situations as well as help others in those situations.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a super deep conversation that I feel like we could probably go on for hours. Honestly, we could probably make like a part 2 out of this. But I don't know. It's one of those topics, and it's just one of those situations where you say, you know, it's one of those things where you just have to talk about, like what we were saying at the very beginning of this podcast is, you know, if these conversations don't happen, where do we get as a society? And it's turtle. Yeah. You know, where do we get as a society and all of that? And it's really important to remember that kind of thing. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is a happy ending.
Yeah.
I like this.
Anything else before I close this out?
Nope.
Always stay thinking, and let your thoughts run wild.
You're gonna be that like dad who just like sits up very late at night with all of your kids' friends, and you're just gonna be like, remember to think about everything.
Be one with the Tao.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yikes.
All right.
Yikes.
Well, yeah, so on that note, thank you guys so much for listening. So hopefully this doesn't get cut out. Some of the plans we have in the future, like we kind of plugged in the last one, was hopefully we'll have one of our professors on here at some point. We'll also have other people have other topics. We promise not all of them will be as serious as this one, but we figured, as Josh and I were creating the original themes for this thing, we wanted to make some of them serious and make some of them, one of the original plans we had for this was to quote unquote document our deep conversations. And so if you like listening to them, you found the right podcast. But anyways, so some of the plans we have for the future, we'll have other lighter themes. Eventually we'll talk about different things that are more just straight Bethel centric and not just, applications to society in general, and not get super deep with that. But yeah, we'll talk about other things. We'll have other people on here, and we might have a couple podcasts where it's just either me and someone else that's not a host or one of the other hosts, or and yeah, so we'll see what happens. We'll see where this goes. And yeah, thanks for listening.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Adios.